My name is Lisa Bennett. I'm 29 years old, and on the morning of my wedding, two empty chairs in the front row told me everything my parents had refused to say out loud. They had not been delayed. They had not gotten lost. They had chosen not to come because I had committed the unforgivable crime of marrying before their perfect daughter. 3 weeks later, I walked into their coastal estate carrying a sealed folder, and my mother met me in the foyer with the same polished smile she used on wealthy clients. "We treated you both the same," she said. I laughed before I could stop myself. "Really?" My father stormed out of his office, slammed his palm against the banister, and shouted, "You ruined your sister's wedding!" I looked directly at him. By telling the truth? The silence that followed was more satisfying than any apology they could have offered. Upstairs, someone began crying. In the courtyard, vendors were quietly removing arrangements from an event that had once been advertised as the wedding of the season. My sister's fiancé had disappeared, my father's business partners were demanding answers, and the perfect family portrait my parents had spent 30 years constructing was finally splitting down the middle. But none of them understood that the collapse had not begun with the folder in my hands. It had begun years earlier, with a locked desk, a missing inheritance statement, and one sentence my grandmother whispered to me before she died. Before I tell you what my father said next, and what happened after I walked out, tell me, what time is it where you are right now, and where are you watching from? I want to know how far this story of a perfect family's downfall will travel. To understand why my parents considered my wedding an act of betrayal, you need to understand the Bennett family business. Bellwether House was a restored 19th-century sea captain's estate overlooking the rocky coast near Kennebunkport, Maine. My father, Walter Bennett, had transformed it into one of the most exclusive wedding venues in the state. My mother, Diane Bennett, managed the clients, the photographers, and the carefully controlled stories that appeared in bridal magazines. They did not simply host weddings. They sold perfection. Every table setting, every sunset photograph, and every smiling family portrait had to support the image that the Bennetts understood love better than anyone else. My older sister Evelyn fit naturally into that world. She was elegant, disciplined, and photogenic. By 31, she had built a popular wedding planning account online and presented herself as the future owner of Bellwether House. I worked 40 minutes away in the sound archive of the Maine Maritime Museum, restoring damaged interviews, ship logs, and recordings rescued from failing tape. My parents described my work as playing with old voices in a basement. Evelyn described hers as building a legacy. Growing up, the difference between us was never announced as favoritism. It was disguised as practicality. Evelyn received professional dance lessons because they improved her confidence. I was told the school audio club was an unnecessary distraction. Evelyn's mistakes were signs that she was under pressure. Mine were evidence that I lacked ambition. When she changed majors twice, my parents paid the additional tuition without complaint. When I applied for a graduate preservation program, my father asked why anyone needed a degree to clean recordings. My grandmother, Margaret Bennett, was the only person who never treated my interests like an embarrassing phase. She had spent decades recording oral histories from fishing families along the Maine coast, and she taught me that damaged voices were still worth saving. Before she died, she created separate trusts for Evelyn and me. She told me mine was meant for education, a home, or the beginning of an independent life. "Never let anyone convince you that security must be earned through obedience," she whispered during our last private conversation. I was 22 then, grieving and too trusting to ask for copies of the documents. My father told me he would manage everything until I was ready. For years, whenever I asked about the trust, he said the investments were tied up or performing badly. At the same time, Evelyn's career expanded. She launched a planning company called Evelyn Bennett Weddings, hired 2 assistants, and began using Bellwether House as her personal showroom. My parents said her success proved what happened when a daughter respected the family vision. Then I met Owen Mercer. He was a ferry systems engineer who could repair almost anything but never treated people like projects. We met while I was recording the final testimony of a retired harbor pilot. Owen had volunteered to restore the old signal equipment displayed beside the recording booth. He listened when I spoke, remembered details my own family ignored, and never once asked how my work could be made more impressive. After 2 years together, he proposed at the decommissioned signal station where we had shared our first lunch. I said yes before he finished the question. My parents' reaction was not joy. My mother stared at the ring and asked whether Evelyn knew. My father poured himself a drink and said, "This timing is going to create unnecessary complications." Evelyn had been engaged to Grant Holloway for 11 months, but they had not chosen a date because she wanted Bellwether House renovated before her ceremony. Her wedding was supposed to relaunch the estate and elevate both families socially. My mother explained that Evelyn had waited her entire life for that moment. "You can wait 1 more year," she told me. Owen and I did not want a luxury event or a magazine feature. We wanted a small ceremony at the signal station in October, before winter storms made the coast unreliable. We offered to choose a date nowhere near Evelyn's eventual wedding. My father still refused. "The older sister marries first," he said. "People notice these things." I asked which people mattered enough to control my marriage. He answered, "The people who understand family." That was when I realized this was not about scheduling. It was about hierarchy. Evelyn had to reach every milestone first because her life was the official Bennett story. Mine was allowed only when it did not distract from hers. I booked the signal station anyway. 2 days later, my mother called and said that if I insisted on humiliating Evelyn, she and my father would not attend. I thought it was a threat designed to frighten me into surrendering. It was not. On my wedding morning, the front row remained empty. My parents posted a photograph from Bellwether House at the exact hour of my ceremony, smiling beside Evelyn beneath the caption, "Family is about honoring the moments that truly matter." I saw it after Owen and I exchanged vows. For a few seconds I could not breathe. Then Owen took my phone, switched it off, and reminded me that 43 people had crossed rain-soaked roads to stand beside us. My parents believed their absence would shame me. Instead, it showed me exactly who my family was. What I did not yet know was that their punishment had a financial reason too. If I began building a life outside their control, I might finally examine the money they had spent years hiding. The first clue arrived inside an old cardboard mailer 10 days after the wedding. Rowan Ellis, my closest friend from college, worked in document preservation for a probate firm in Portland. She had been helping transfer archived estate files into a new system when she found a copy of a letter bearing my grandmother's name. The firm had represented my grandmother during the final revision of her estate, and Rowan recognized both my name and Bellwether House. She did not remove confidential records or give me anything she was not legally allowed to see. Instead, she mailed me a publicly releasable notice stating that I had become the sole beneficiary of the Margaret Bennett Independence Trust on my 25th birthday. The notice listed a trustee identification number and instructed me to contact the designated bank. I read it 3 times. I was 29. According to the document, control should have transferred to me 4 years earlier. I called the bank the following morning. After verifying my identity, the representative became cautious. She said the account had been closed 18 months ago following a beneficiary-authorized distribution. I told her I had authorized nothing. There was a pause, followed by a request that I visit a branch with identification. Rowan came with me. The bank officer placed 6 withdrawal authorizations on the table. Together, they totaled $186,000. The signature at the bottom of each form resembled mine, but the letters were too careful, as though someone had copied my name instead of writing it naturally. The money had moved through a family holding company and then into 3 destinations: renovations at Bellwether House, the operating account of Evelyn Bennett Weddings, and a payment to Holloway Development, the company owned by Grant's father. My father had not merely withheld information. Someone had forged my authorization and emptied nearly everything my grandmother left me. The dates made the betrayal worse. The first withdrawal occurred 2 weeks after I told my parents I wanted to apply for graduate school. My father had claimed the trust had lost value and discouraged me from taking on debt. The second funded the glass conservatory Evelyn used for promotional photographs. The third covered deposits for imported stone, custom lighting, and a bridal suite renovation designed specifically for her wedding. My supposedly irresponsible life had been financing the perfect daughter's future. Rowan urged me not to confront anyone until I had legal advice. Through her firm, she referred me to Amelia Cross, an attorney who handled trust disputes and financial exploitation. Amelia reviewed the documents and immediately requested preservation of the bank's internal records, including electronic access logs, notarization records, and correspondence from the trustee. My father had served as temporary trustee until my 25th birthday. After that date, he had no legal right to authorize distributions without my consent. The bank forms contained scanned copies of my driver's license and a notarized declaration claiming I had chosen to invest my inheritance in the family business. The notary stamp belonged to a retired employee of Bellwether House who had died 8 months earlier. Amelia explained that the pattern could support civil claims and potentially criminal investigation, but she warned me that proof mattered more than suspicion. "Do not give them time to rewrite the story," she said. "People who live through appearances often destroy evidence to protect them." I returned to my apartment and searched every box I had taken from my childhood home. At the bottom of an old equipment case, I found a digital voice recorder my grandmother had given me. Most of the files were ordinary: gulls near the harbor, fragments of interviews, my younger voice practicing introductions. One recording was dated 3 weeks before her death. I heard her breathing, the rustle of paper, and then her unmistakable voice. She stated that she had established equal but separate funds for both granddaughters. She emphasized that neither fund was to be transferred to Bellwether House or used for the other sister. Then my mother's voice entered the room. Diane said, "Margaret, surely Walter should have flexibility if one girl needs more help than the other." My grandmother answered, "Help is not the same as taking. Lisa's money belongs to Lisa." The recording was not enough on its own to prove fraud, but it proved my mother knew exactly what my grandmother intended. I sat on the floor listening to that exchange until Owen came home. I expected rage to overwhelm me. Instead, I felt a strange stillness. All my life, my parents had told me Evelyn received more because she worked harder, planned better, and deserved investment. The truth was simpler. They had decided her future mattered more, then used my future to purchase it. 2 days later, Evelyn sent a group message announcing that her wedding would take place in 6 weeks. The renovated estate was finally ready, she wrote, and the celebration would also mark the national launch of her luxury planning brand. Attached was a digital invitation featuring a photograph of her standing inside the glass conservatory my inheritance had helped build. My parents had not invited me. My name was absent from the family section of the wedding website. Beneath a photograph of our childhood home, Evelyn had written, "The bride was raised as the only daughter willing to carry forward the Bennett legacy." I nearly replied in anger. Amelia stopped me. She had received the bank's access records. Every authorization had been submitted from the office computer at Bellwether House. 4 carried my father's administrator credentials. 2 had been uploaded under my mother's account. When family members use love to hide theft, do you protect the family story, or do you protect the truth? I chose the truth, but I wanted evidence so complete that no smile, tear, or polished public statement could bury it. Part 4. For the next month, I behaved as though I knew nothing. My parents interpreted my silence as defeat. My mother sent one carefully worded message saying she hoped marriage would help me become less impulsive. My father sent none. Evelyn's online posts grew more elaborate each day. She displayed custom gowns, engraved dinnerware, and a floral installation flown in from Europe. She called the wedding a celebration of heritage, loyalty, and earned success. Every word felt designed to erase me. I did not respond publicly. Instead, I worked with Amelia to reconstruct the money trail. The holding company that received my trust funds belonged jointly to my parents. From there, a portion had been transferred to Evelyn's business as a founder advancement. Another portion had covered Bellwether House's overdue mortgage payments. The estate had not been thriving, as my parents claimed. It was carrying millions in debt after my father expanded too quickly. Evelyn's wedding was not simply a family celebration. It was a marketing campaign intended to attract investors and prevent foreclosure. Grant Holloway's family had agreed to support the business after the marriage, but only if the estate appeared profitable and scandal-free. My parents had emptied my trust to create that illusion. Then Amelia uncovered a second betrayal. A loan application submitted by Bellwether House listed me as a minority shareholder and guarantor. The document carried another imitation of my signature. If the company defaulted, creditors could attempt to pursue me for nearly $400,000. My father had not only stolen my inheritance, he had tried to attach his failing business to my name. Owen wanted me to report everything immediately. Part of me agreed. Another part needed to understand how far my family was willing to go. Amelia negotiated with the bank and filed formal notices disputing the signatures. She also contacted the county clerk to preserve corporate records. We learned that an emergency investor meeting would be held during Evelyn's wedding weekend. Grant's father planned to announce a partnership with Bellwether House at the welcome reception, using the wedding as proof of the Bennett family's stability. That was why my parents had reacted so violently when I married first. Evelyn's ceremony had been sold to investors as the beginning of a multi-generational succession plan. My small wedding disrupted the image that every Bennett daughter supported the estate and followed the family timeline. My independence made potential investors curious. My absence from Evelyn's website made them more curious. My parents needed me silent, invisible, and legally connected to the business long enough to secure the deal. While Amelia prepared the case, I rebuilt the parts of my life they had tried to keep small. At the museum, I proposed an exhibition titled Voices Beneath the Static, featuring restored recordings from women who had worked in Maine's shipyards during World War II. The museum director had rejected a similar proposal a year earlier because I presented it timidly and described it as a side project. This time, I arrived with a budget, community partners, and sample audio. The board approved it unanimously. I was promoted to lead audio conservator and invited to oversee the exhibition. Owen and I moved into a modest apartment overlooking the working harbor. It had uneven floors, narrow windows, and none of the luxury my parents considered impressive. It was also the first home where no one treated my choices as a temporary rebellion. Rowan helped me digitize my grandmother's recordings. Together, we discovered an interview in which she discussed Bellwether House before my father converted it into a wedding venue. She said the property had been purchased using money from the sale of her own family's fishing land. She wanted it preserved as security for both granddaughters, not handed entirely to whichever one best represented the Bennett name. Her estate documents confirmed that after my parents' deaths, ownership was supposed to pass equally to Evelyn and me, yet the investor materials described Evelyn as the sole future owner. My signature appeared on a waiver relinquishing my interest. Again, I had never signed it. By then, the pattern was undeniable. My parents had systematically removed me from every asset while using my identity whenever it benefited them. Amelia asked what outcome I wanted. I could seek repayment quietly, negotiate a settlement, and avoid public exposure. For one evening, I considered it. A private settlement would protect my job, my marriage, and my peace. Then Evelyn posted a video from the conservatory. She stood beside my parents and thanked them for sacrificing equally for both daughters, even when only one appreciated it. My mother looked directly into the camera and said, "We never played favorites." The video reached nearly 500,000 views. Thousands of strangers praised their parenting. That same evening, my mother emailed me a legal release. She claimed it was a routine document needed to update the family estate after my marriage. In reality, it would have confirmed the forged transfers, waived my claims, and accepted responsibility for part of Bellwether House's debt. At the bottom, she wrote, Signing this would show that you still care about your sister. I forwarded it to Amelia. Then I replied with 4 words. I'll consider attending Saturday. Within minutes, Evelyn sent me an invitation to the welcome reception. She did not want her sister there. She wanted my visible presence as proof that the Bennett family remained united. They had spent years treating me like a background figure in their portrait. Now they needed me in the frame. I decided to attend. But I would not bring a gift. I would bring the original trust notice, the bank records, the forged guarantees, the ownership waiver, and my grandmother's restored voice. Part 5. The welcome reception took place beneath the glass roof of Bellwether House's new conservatory. My inheritance glittered everywhere, in the imported tiles, brass lighting, carved bar, and white roses surrounding Evelyn's monogram. More than 200 guests filled the room, including investors, reporters, wedding executives, and relatives who had ignored me for years. Owen stayed beside me while Amelia waited off-site, ready to release our filings if anyone tried to remove us or destroy evidence. My parents greeted guests beneath a banner reading, "A Legacy Continued." When my mother saw me, relief flashed across her face before she arranged it into a smile. "Thank goodness you came," she whispered. "Do not create a scene." I asked whether she had missed me at my wedding. Her smile tightened. "This is not the time." My father barely acknowledged Owen before saying, "You'll sit with the family during the announcement. Afterward, we'll discuss the documents you need to sign. No congratulations, no apology." He assumed my presence meant surrender. Evelyn descended the staircase in a white rehearsal gown, Grant following behind her. She hugged me for the cameras and murmured, "I'm glad you finally decided not to punish everyone." I stepped back. "Do you know where the money for this conservatory came from?" Her expression froze. "Dad handled the financing." That answer told me she knew enough to be afraid. Dinner began with speeches about loyalty and family unity. Grant's father praised the Bennetts as the kind of stable family his company wanted as partners. My father announced that Evelyn and Grant would lead Bellwether House into its next generation. A screen behind him showed Evelyn as future majority owner. My name appeared beneath hers as a supporting family shareholder who had pledged her interest to secure the expansion loan. Then my father invited the family onto the stage. This was the picture they needed. Both daughters smiling together as proof that nothing was wrong. I walked up carrying the sealed folder. My father said, "Diane and I have always believed in treating our daughters equally." My mother nodded. "We treated them both the same." I laughed. The microphone caught it and the room fell quiet. "Really?" I asked. My father lowered his voice. "Not here, Lisa." I faced the guests. My parents skipped my wedding because I married before Evelyn. They said I damaged the family's image. Tonight, they invited me because they need that image to secure an investment. Evelyn stepped toward me. "You couldn't let me have one day." I looked at the ownership chart behind us. One day, they gave you my inheritance, my ownership interest, and my name. A murmur moved through the room. My father reached for my arm, but Owen stepped between us. I removed the trust statement. My grandmother left me $186,000. It was withdrawn without my authorization, moved through Bennett Coastal Holdings and used for this conservatory, Evelyn's business and part of the Holloway Partnership deposit. Grant's father stood and asked for a copy. My mother whispered, "You don't understand the arrangement." I held up the bank forms. These signatures were forged. 4 transfers were submitted through my father's account. 2 were uploaded through my mother's. Evelyn stared at them. "You said she agreed." My father grabbed the microphone. "This is a private misunderstanding being weaponized by a jealous daughter." I placed the loan guarantee on the podium, then explained why Bellwether House listed me as a guarantor for $400,000 without my knowledge. Investors began checking their phones. Grant asked his father whether he had known. His father said nothing. Evelyn turned to me. "You waited until my wedding to do this." "I discovered it after mine," I said. The wedding all of you skipped. My mother began crying, but she looked toward the guests, not me. She claimed the money had been used to save the family property. I asked why saving it required erasing me from it. Then the screen changed. Rowan replaced the presentation with my grandmother's estate instructions. The clause appeared clearly. Bellwether House was intended to pass equally to Evelyn and me. Beneath it appeared the waiver carrying my forged signature. Grant's father ordered his attorney to suspend the partnership announcement. My father lunged toward the laptop, but the technician disconnected it. "Turn that off!" he shouted. No one moved. Then I played my grandmother's restored recording. "Lisa's money belongs to Lisa. Neither girl's future is to be purchased with the others." My mother's younger voice asked for flexibility if one daughter needed more. My grandmother replied, "Favoritism becomes theft the moment you take what was never yours to give." The room went silent. Evelyn demanded to know whether her company had been built with my trust. My father told her not to be manipulated. I handed her the transfer records. "Your office, staff deposits, and wedding launch were partly paid with money Grandma left to me." Grant asked whether she had known. Evelyn claimed she thought it came from a family investment. Then he asked why she had signed a document identifying the source as my beneficiary account. Her silence answered him. Grant removed his ring and placed it on the table. He said his family would not enter a marriage or partnership built on fraud. Evelyn grabbed his sleeve, but he pulled away. My father shouted that the money would have been repaid after the investment closed. Grant's father answered, "There will be no investment." Vendors whispered. Reporters raised their phones. Investors demanded explanations. My father turned toward me, his face red. "You ruined your sister's wedding." I looked directly at him. "By telling the truth?" He said I could have handled everything privately. I reminded him that he had tried to make me sign a release validating forged documents. Then I faced Evelyn. "You didn't lose your wedding because I married first. You lost it because all three of you believed my life could be spent without my consent." She screamed that I had always hated her. "No," I said. "I stopped protecting people who never protected me." My father threatened to disinherit me. Several guests laughed because the documents behind him showed he had already tried. I removed the final notice. Amelia had filed a civil action seeking restitution, removal of my parents as trustees, cancellation of the forged guarantee, and an injunction preventing the transfer of Bellwether House. Copies had been delivered during the reception. My father checked his phone and saw the confirmation. His expression collapsed. My mother asked what I wanted. Standing beneath the glass roof bought with my stolen money, I realized I no longer wanted their apology or approval. "I want my name removed from your lies," I said. "I want every dollar accounted for. From now on, contact me only through my attorney." Owen and I walked out while the reception dissolved behind us. I could hear my father shouting, Evelyn crying, and guests leaving before dinner was served. I did not feel victorious. I felt free. Victory depends on watching someone else fall. Freedom begins when their fall is no longer your responsibility. Part 6. My mother came to the museum 2 weeks later, 1 hour before the opening of Voices Beneath the Static. She stood beneath a suspended fishing vessel wearing a dark coat and no makeup, as though abandoning her usual polished appearance should count as honesty. I asked whether Amelia knew she was there. Diane said attorneys were destroying the family, and that mothers should not need permission to speak to their daughters. I almost walked away. Then she said, "Your grandmother would hate what you've done." That sentence made me stop. My grandmother's memory had been used to control me often enough. I led Diane into an empty listening room and closed the door. She began with tears. She said Bellwether House had been close to foreclosure, my father had panicked, and Evelyn's marriage had seemed like the only way to save what generations had built. She insisted they had always intended to repay my trust after the Holloway investment. I asked why repayment required forged signatures. She called them technical shortcuts. I asked why she had uploaded 2 of the forms herself. She said my father told her I had agreed verbally. I played the audio of her conversation with my grandmother. She lowered her eyes. That was years ago. You knew the money was mine. I knew your grandmother favored you emotionally. I stared at her. Even after everything, she needed to recast theft as balance. Diane said Evelyn had carried the pressure of representing the family and deserved support. I asked whether I deserved the right to consent. She replied that families sometimes make decisions for the greater good. Whose good? I asked. She had no answer. Then her real purpose emerged. The civil case had frozen major bellwether accounts. Vendors were demanding payment, investors had withdrawn, and the bank was reviewing the original mortgage. My father needed me to sign a temporary agreement allowing the estate to continue operating during settlement negotiations. In exchange, my parents would acknowledge that administrative errors had occurred. They would not admit fraud. They would not repay the full trust immediately. They wanted me to rescue the business one more time, using the same duty they had invoked while stealing from me. Diane reached across the table. We are still your family. Blood cannot be cut away because of paperwork. I moved my hand before she could touch it. This was never paperwork. It was a decision you made every time you chose silence. She said she had been trapped between her husband and her daughters. I reminded her that she had helped prepare the release sent after my wedding. She had not been trapped. She had participated. For a moment, her sadness vanished and resentment appeared. Do you understand what will happen if Bellwether House closes? Your father will lose everything. Evelyn's reputation is destroyed. People are laughing at us. There it was. The same fear that had governed our family for years. Not guilt. Not concern for what they had done to me. Fear of being seen clearly. I told her I would not sign. Diane stood and said I was punishing everyone because I had always been jealous of my sister. I opened the listening room door. Outside, museum guests were gathering for an exhibition built from voices my parents had considered worthless. No, I said. I'm refusing to punish myself for your choices. Before leaving, she told me Evelyn had not left her apartment since Grant ended the engagement. She expected that information to make me surrender. I felt sympathy for my sister, but sympathy did not erase responsibility. Evelyn had signed documents identifying my trust as the source of her funding. She had publicly described herself as the only daughter worthy of the family legacy. Her humiliation was painful, but it was not mine to repair. Diane walked away without attending the exhibition. That night, the museum hall filled beyond capacity. Visitors listened to women describe welding ship hulls, operating cranes, and surviving years in which their labor was hidden behind men's names. One recording ended with a woman saying, "They called us selfish when we asked to be credited. That word was cheaper than paying us what we earned." I stood beside Owen and understood why restoring voices had always mattered to me. Silence is rarely natural. Someone benefits from it. My parents had mistaken my silence for weakness because they never imagined I was learning how to make damaged truth audible again. Part 7. The legal case lasted 11 months. The bank's investigation confirmed that my signatures had been forged and that internal safeguards had failed. The bank reimbursed a substantial portion of the trust, then pursued recovery from my parents and their holding company. The forged loan guarantee was invalidated, and my name was removed from Bellwether House's debt. My parents avoided a criminal trial by entering a restitution agreement and cooperating with the financial investigation, but the public record could not be erased. Walter Bennett resigned from every management position connected to the estate. Diane sold her interest to satisfy part of the judgment. Bellwether House entered court-supervised restructuring and was eventually purchased by a regional hospitality group for far less than my father once claimed it was worth. He lost the business reputation he had valued above his daughters. Former clients filed additional claims after learning that deposits had been moved between events to cover debts. The wedding magazines that once celebrated the Bennett family removed their profiles. My father blamed me in every message he sent through Amelia. Not once did he acknowledge that none of it would have happened without the theft. Evelyn's company collapsed after vendors discovered that several invoices had been paid with disputed funds. Her followers disappeared almost as quickly as they had gathered. For months, she posted nothing. Eventually, she sent me a letter. She admitted she knew the first business transfer came from my trust, but claimed our parents had convinced her I did not care about the money. She wrote that she had spent her entire life believing success was proof of love, and that losing both had left her unsure who she was. She did not ask for forgiveness. She asked whether I would ever speak to her again. I answered once. I told her accountability had to exist before reconciliation, and that I would not rebuild a relationship while she continued describing her choices as something our parents made her do. I wished her healing, but I did not invite her back into my life. Boundaries are not cruelty simply because the person outside them feels pain. My mother moved into a smaller house inland. Relatives said she was lonely and that I should visit because regret was punishment enough. I disagreed. Regret without accountability is often only grief over consequences. My father attempted to launch a consulting business, but former partners avoided him. He had spent decades teaching us that reputation was everything. In the end, his own dishonesty made his name the one thing he could no longer sell. Owen and I celebrated our first anniversary at the signal station with the people who had attended our wedding. We brought folding tables, hot soup, and a small cake from the neighborhood bakery. There were no photographers, investment announcements, or curated family speeches. No one needed the day to prove anything. Our marriage had survived the storm because it had never been designed as a performance. Voices Beneath the Static became the museum's most attended special exhibition that year. I was invited to lead a regional preservation project recovering oral histories from closed coastal factories. The position gave me financial stability, professional recognition, and something my parents' approval never had: peace. With part of the recovered trust, Owen and I purchased a narrow brick building near the harbor. The ground floor became a nonprofit audio lab where students and local families could preserve recordings they could not afford to restore commercially. We named it Margaret House. A framed sentence from my grandmother hangs near the entrance. A damaged voice is not a worthless voice. Sometimes visitors ask whether exposing my family was revenge. I understand why it looks that way. My sister lost her wedding. My father lost Bellwether House. My mother lost the perfect family image she had protected more fiercely than her children. But I did not manufacture those consequences. I stopped absorbing them. There is an important difference between destroying someone and refusing to stand beneath the structure they built with lies. My parents skipped my wedding because they believed absence would remind me of my place. Instead, those empty chairs gave me permission to stop begging for a seat in their version of family. Blood may explain how people enter your life, but it does not give them ownership of your future. Love does not require forged signatures, stolen opportunities, or silence in the name of unity. A family that demands your freedom as the price of belonging is not offering love. It is offering captivity with sentimental language. Sometimes healing means reconciliation. Sometimes it means distance, legal boundaries, and accepting that an apology may never come. Walking away is not always failure. In some families, it is the first honest decision anyone has made in years. So ask yourself this: are you protecting peace, or are you protecting an appearance that requires you to disappear? How much of your life are you willing to surrender so other people can keep calling the family perfect? I chose the truth, even when it cost me the family portrait. And when that portrait finally crumbled, I discovered I had never been standing outside a home. I had been standing outside a cage.
Thank you for being here until the end of the story. Everything in this video is fictional and intended only for storytelling, entertainment, and reflection. We hope it reminds you that you are allowed to outgrow people who only knew how to love you when you were useful to them. Growth may disappoint those who benefited from your old boundaries, but it can still save your life.